Morning, everyone. Welcome to the Resource Advisor Cohort. I just want to say quick little thing. I was just looking up some stuff last night and realized that we've been doing this for 5 years, just over 5 years. And this is the 40th cohort training meeting thing that we've had. So, and we just went over 2,000 people on our email list. So I just want to thank everybody who's been a part of this, and especially this panel who's going to be here for our 40th. Thanks everybody for helping get resource advisors more information and more training. That's all I got, and I'm going to hand it off to the other Lynn to take over for the rest of this.
I'm going to be facilitating for the first 30 minutes, and then I have to step off and go to a meeting, at which point Melissa Navis will take over and start asking you guys the questions from there. So let's start with introductions. And Teresa, would you like to introduce yourself? What's your name, your agency, your day job, and why we invited you to this panel, and a little bit of your fire background?
Okay, sure. I can start. Hi, everyone. I'm Teresa Benson, and I'm the forest supervisor on the Sequoia National Forest and the Giant Sequoia National Monument, which is in the southern Sierra Nevada in California. I've been in this job now for a little over 4 years, but I actually started my career with the Forest Service here on the Sequoia in 1990. So 32 years ago, I started here, and then I left and went off to other various forests across the country and did a lot of other things, but I ended up coming back here, and I started my career as a wildlife biologist. So my fire experience really started myself as a resource advisor. I did some work with fire support at the beginning of my career, but I quickly moved into becoming a resource advisor way back in the 90s, actually. And it was really different then. It was, just a lot of OJT. You just learned as you had fires. And the first fire that I was involved with really heavily as a resource advisor was in 2000, and it was a really big fire here on the Sequoia, actually. And so my experience then as a line officer started about 10 years ago, and that's when I became an agency administrator officially. When I was doing resource advisor work back then, we kind of were filling in for the district ranger a lot of times and doing agency administrator type work informally as resource advisors. It was kind of an interesting deal, but then I became an agency administrator officially about 10 years ago in my first district ranger job, and then just have been really active in that role, both in my job, my actual job when I have fires here on the Sequoia, and then I travel around Region 5, California, and serve as a coach for other new agency administrators that need assistance. So I'm an advanced agency administrator with the Forest Service. I think that probably answered most everything there, did it, Lynn?
Yeah, that totally covered it. I forgot to ask what your experience with reeds was, but it sounds like you got it. Nailed it anyways. Jeremy, would you like to speak to the same?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. Jeremy Kiesling, currently the Deputy Fire Staff on the Humboldt-Toiyabe National Forest out of Sparks, Nevada, just on the other side of the Sierra Crest from Teresa there. And I've been over here on the HT for this is my 5th season. And before that, worked up in the Pacific Northwest for about 4 seasons, and then worked in Colorado for about 10, and then California, and then Arizona and New Mexico before that. So I've been all over the country, various regions, and worked on various IMTs. This is my second season as a incident commander in the Great Basin for a Type 2 incident management team. Before that, I've worked as a division supervisor, ops chief, and a safety officer in the various regions, and also working in fire and fuels management, just coordinating on local district levels, things like that, with resource advisors, and then reads and reefs on the local units on fires. So, and just on my day job, I'm the alternate training officer on the force. So working with our local reads and reefs, getting them signed up, pack tested, putting on training, helping them out to get certified, and talking to them about their options to move forward in their career. That's my career in a nutshell. Thanks.
Thank you. Steve, would you like to share your background next?
Scott, maybe. Scott.
I said Steve. I know. I mentally just got it. I was like, oh, nope, Scott. Sorry about that, man.
That's okay. If I hear Steve again, I'll answer. That way I'll know now.
Hopefully not.
Good morning, folks. Much like Lynn, I'm on leave this week, and but I know this is an important group, and so I wanted to be here with you. So glad to be joining you. Glad to be invited. I'm Scott Ray, the Forest Supervisor on the Daniel Boone National Forest, and much like Teresa, I've come full circle. I started on the Daniel Boone back when I was 16 as a high school volunteer doing wildlife projects and fisheries, and got a couple of summer internships, and did some naturalist work. Left the Forest Service for a while, went to TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority, for anybody who knows who that is, and worked for the state of Kentucky as a wildlife biologist, and then came back to the Forest Service about 2000 and started as a GS5 wildlife technician. Had a wildlife biology degree, and just looking to get my foot in the door. And it was either pick the Forest Service or Disney World had offered me a job at their new Animal Kingdom. And so I don't know which was the right choice, but I went with the Forest Service, and it's worked out well. So I have been a wildlife biologist, supervisory wildlife biologist. I was the Region 8, Region 9 stewardship coordinator for some time. I was also the CFLR Collaborative Forest Landscape Restoration Coordinator and Deputy Ranger down in Florida on the Osceola, and spent some time there working on longleaf pine restoration and Florida flatwoods work. Then moved to the Francis Marion and Sumter National Forest, did a couple of ranger stints, also a natural resources staff officer role, and then came to the Daniel Boone back in 2016 as the Deputy Forest Supervisor, and then just last year became the Forest Supervisor here. So it's been a long climb over the last 22 years, but a good climb. And in terms of my read and fire work, I started back with the agency as a firefighter. I would dig. That was my job, and put in line, and had a lot of good experiences with that. Had some downsides too. I was on the Stanza fire where we lost the Lassen engine. I was actually on that piece of line that night, and that left a pretty big mark on me for a long time. And actually on the Dixie fire last year, got to go by the memorial there on the Lassen Forest, and that was great seeing those folks memorialized there. And so I still get out, but not as a dirt digger as much anymore, although I stay arduous level qualified. It's a little harder each year, but I've still been doing it. And I have been going out as a read for the last, I don't know, 10 to 12 years or so, and been from Florida to Alaska serving as a resource advisor. Have been through the lead read course, and most recently, though, have been doing a lot more agency administrator work, both in the East and then out West as well. There, Teresa, working with some of your counterparts last year on the Dixie, Ted MacArthur, and some of those folks out there. and then went up to the Six Rivers and worked actually in place of Ted while he was coaching as an advanced. I served as the acting force soup there, and also did some agency administrator work on McCash fire. So lots of time in fire, most of which has been really good. And the part that I really enjoy about as much as anything is working with the READs, the resource advisors we have. I believe in what we're doing out there and why it's so important that we have resource advisors on the line with us out there. We have folks in camp making sure that we're trying to minimize their impacts as much as possible. And so I think with that, I'll pause and see if there's anything I missed.
Got it. All sounded really good to me. So we'll catch it on the questions if we got missed anything. Jason, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, you bet, Lynn. My name's Jason Loomis. I'm currently the acting Deputy Regional Fire Management Officer for the National Park Service Pacific West Regional Office. I work virtually, remotely out of Central Oregon and Bend. Pacific West region covers basically the West Coast, and also includes Idaho, Nevada, and Hawaii. So pretty large area. For me, last week marked my 33rd year in fire management. I'm currently a Type 1 IC on Pacific Northwest Team 2. Prior to that, I was a Type 2 IC for the last 3-4 years on Northwest Team 7. And prior to that, Operations Section Chief, Division Supervisor, Fire Behavior Analyst. So yeah, 33 years in fire management. You know, my experience with READs has largely been on large fire support. Definitely more so than my day job, ironically, working for the Park Service, but I do have exposure both in the day job and as IC. For the day job, you know, a lot of our fires and our parks in our region, obviously we have a very robust READ program, REEF program. In the Pacific West region, just tremendous leadership from Nelson Siefkin, Cedar Drake, you know, just several others that I know I'm forgetting, but those two definitely are at the top of my list. Certainly heavily involvement there with both managed fire and full suppression fire. So exposure there primarily as a duty officer, also assisting with training. To some degree, although not formal training, it's more behind the scenes of IQCS and Red Card, and also workforce development and helping those collateral duty responders. As an IC, you know, really some pretty cool things I see coming along here for both the Type 1 teams in the Pacific Northwest is we carry resource advisors. Obviously, Lynn on this call is one of them. Lisa Manchnik is our resource advisor. We roll her in as a liaison, and so she is very much part of command and general staff and is at the forefront of all the C&G decisions. And that's really, you know, my 4 roles with the teams have been very fruitful, and that's just been a huge eye-opening for me, and that's something I would love to see from the other teams is to roll a lead READ into the mix as a command general staff or as part of a functional position. So yeah, real good interaction there. I know we have some other questions. I think I will save them for the particular questions, but I do have some war stories to share, some good, bad, and the ugly. So I'll defer to that point. And for the sake of for the hour that we have together, I'll turn it back to you, Lynn. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. Yeah, hopefully we'll get to hear some of those stories throughout this hour. So I'm going to ask that we just need to give people that are new to this structure an idea of what an AA and an IC is. Could one IC and one AA explain your role in the fire and what's your highest priority when you first get onto the fire, and then how does it change throughout time? And what are transitions like for you guys? Can we start with an AA, please? Either Scott or Teresa.
Go ahead if you want, Teresa, and then I'll fill in or take the next question.
Okay, yeah, maybe we could just tag team it. I can share a little bit and then you can add some more with regards to your experience and things that I leave out. So I'm not sure if I'll hit on all of the points there, but I'll just kind of give you in general what we do as agency administrators. So, I mean, the critical element really is having the ability and organization ready when you do have a fire that requires a team, a type 1 or type 2 team to arrive, that you're ready with regards to having the delegation of authority that is prepared, and then you give that as the agency administrator to the IC when they arrive. So that's really the first task as an agency administrator that you have to be prepared for. I actually hosted 12 type 1 and 2 teams last year on the Sequoia, so I have a huge file ready of everything that I need if I have a team on their way to come here. And so what we do is we'll typically size up the incident that's occurring. It's usually under a type 3 organization, and then you can tell pretty quickly with a complexity analysis that you and your staff do locally if you're going to be needing a team. So when you do order a team and they're on their way, as the agency administrator, you're just basically preparing to hand over the running of that incident to the IC. And so getting everything organized with regards to who is going to be on your staff helping you, who your lead read is, who's available. If you don't have a lead read available, maybe they're off on another fire, going ahead and getting that order in as well so that you have a lead read coming. I really like what Jason put out there as far as having that lead read connected to the team. That would be a really nice benefit as an AA to know that you have that person coming, because oftentimes your lead read is who you have locally is busy on another fire or they're not available. So what I typically do though is get our read team, the local read team, ready so that they're available to meet the team when they arrive and start to get organized around the materials that we're going to want to be sharing with the team. And so really that's more of that initial attack phase. The team is coming, you're still fighting the fire, and then you're going to transition the fire from a type 3 team locally to that team that's arrived. And so as an agency administrator, you are going to be present there and being available for questions and sharing your leader's intent with that letter of delegation and everything else that you want to share at the in brief. And then really at that point, they're off to the races and they're running with the fire. And then for me, during that fire, I just make myself available as that team needs me. And so there's going to be some differences based upon the fire, the complexity, the communities, the team that comes in as far as how much involvement I have. But I'm always available whenever they need me for anything during that incident. And so for me, it's really critical that if the lead read is not on my forest and we've either brought somebody in from another unit or the team arrives with the lead read, that I develop a relationship with that lead read right away so that they know who I am and they know what's available for them to help them with their job locally. That's really critical because I have a staff who can help, but if we don't know who the lead read is and they don't know how to contact all my folks, then it's really difficult to get the right information to the read team. So we've just developed right away a list of all the local folks that work for me that can help that lead read and their team. And we make that direct communication so that they can reach out to my folks and get what they need resource information wise. And so then I think that the last part of it really is the trend. I guess you mentioned the transitioning, and really the thing I would say about that is that when we finally contain the fire and the team heads home, then we on the local unit have the really hard work to do because we move into fire recovery. And that's where the READS documentation that you've done really helps us. And I can tell you that we use that a lot to help us figure out, first, we do a rapid assessment of what we need for the fire recovery, but then those READ notes and documentation and pictures and everything that you've done while you were on the fire, we use that to help us frame what we need to do beyond the fire suppression repair and the bear work. And then what do we need in terms of that longer term recovery for that area? And a lot of times the READs will have data that they've collected during the fire that we can use to help get organized around what we want to do for that longer term need. So that's a really critical piece before the READs go home, that they leave us their data and documentation. And so Scott, I'll turn it over to you to see what I might have missed. That was just a real nutshell.
No, that was really good, Teresa. I think that covered most of it, and maybe a simplified version for the READs is the way I see the agency administrator, like Teresa said, when the team comes in, we turn that fire over to them with a delegation of authority on what they can and can't do. And really at that point, the agency administrator and the ARET, they are the quality assurance. The team is quality control and we're quality assurance. We're making sure the team's doing what they're supposed to be. They sort of self-govern under that delegation, but as Teresa will tell you, sometimes things go a little sideways with teams, and sometimes the public want to be able to talk to their local agency administrator. They have concerns maybe they feel like aren't being addressed, and because the resource advisors work for the agency administrator, I can tell you there have been a number of times where I've had to step in and help facilitate some dialogue between the teams and resource advisors. Normally we like for those things to work themselves out at the lowest level possible, but sometimes it just doesn't. And so that's where sometimes the agency administrators have to wade in there and help provide that conduit and facilitate that conversation to figure out how to make things work. I'll tell you, I was on a fire. I won't tell you when because I don't want to disclose who it was with and where, but we had some resource advisors that had been put out of what we call Main Street in camp, all the tents that are lined down Main Street there. And the IC was saying it was for COVID precautions. Whether that was the case or they just didn't want the READs inside Main Street, I can't tell you. But what I was able to do as the agency administrator was say, hey, we have to provide a tent for these folks. We have to get them comms. We have to get them internet. You know, I get it if you want to protect your folks in that COVID environment and keep that container around them. But we've got to have a place for our resource advisors here in camp. They're important. They've got important work to do just like you do. So sometimes as agency administrator, it's those kind of things, kind of the things that are flying off to the side or getting sideways with the public that we really have to get engaged with and interact with the team and the IC to make sure everything's going as well as it can. So that's all I would add to what Teresa said.
Thanks, guys. And can we have the ICs give a similar synopsis of what your role is and how you guys, you know, like, sorry, give me how your transitions go.
Go ahead, Jason. I'll let you go first, then I'll pick it up if you.
All right. Thanks, Jeremy. Good to see you again. So a couple of things when an incident commander comes in, you know, the big things that we're looking for in that delegation, the leader's intent document and the WFDIS is alignment. And those alignment are expressing the values and concerns and the priority of those values and concerns. When a type 2 or a type 1 incident management team comes in, it's because the local unit needs help. And typically, the most complex fires, long duration fires, multiple competing interest perhaps. And so we really take a look at alignment with this document and decision, the leader's intent document that's provided from the agency administrator, as well as a delegation of authority to act on their behalf. And so really want to look into those critical values and prioritize. That said, the second thing, and for folks, I recognize a few names on here that have worked with me as an IC. I'm big into relationships, and when we hear, stories about, the Reed staying out of Tent City or, Tent Alley, that's not building those relationships. So that's the other reason why we try to bring in a lead Reed and serve as a liaison and be that conduit from the incident management team to the local unit and to the team of Reeds and Reefs that are there working on the incident. So we very much integrate our resource advisors into our operation, and literally we put them in with operations, because that's really where the rubber meets the road. That's where the implications and that's where we could get sideways, and we don't want that. Another thing I think everybody needs to be aware, just like Reeds and Reefs and agency reps that come in, teams come in for 14 or 21 days and then we leave. Well, there can be a lot of damage done, both socially and environmentally, if we're not in concert with one another. And so, we only have such a small amount of time to establish those relationships and really leave that incident where it needs to be left. And also type 1, typically we pass it to another team, whether it's another type 1 team or type 2 or back to the local unit type 3, we're passing it to another team. Very seldom do we just give it back to a patrol type status. So we want to set that next team up for success. And in doing so, that's where that relationship, that's where identifying those values and identifying those priorities really comes into play and really helps us be successful and helps the local unit meet their needs and also understand their priorities and their values. Jeremy, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, I think you covered it all, Jason. So I don't really have much else to add. It's like you said, it's those relationships, finding out the importance of those relationships and covering those. That's the big one. So I don't have anything else to add on that. Thanks.
Thanks, guys. I'm going to hand it over to Melissa, who's going to take over the facilitating for today.
Thank you, Lynn. Just one quick question. Are we still on the, what are your expectations for the lead read?
Give me a second. No, we're on how do you interact with your counterpart? We want to see how they work together.
Okay. Oh, okay, fantastic. Thank you, Lynn. Okay.
Bye, guys.
Hi, everyone. Just to recap, my name is Melissa Navis. I'm the tribal liaison on the Humboldt-Toiyabe National Forest, part of the planning team. So with that, are we still on? Did everyone have an opportunity to chime in on how do you interact with your counterpart question? Fantastic. Okay. So with the next question, what are your expectations of the lead read and or of the resource advising group? Anyone have thoughts on that? We can start with Jason.
Yeah, sure. So, again, lead read for us is just like a lead agency rep. We oftentimes when we go to incidents, especially type 1, and I don't mean to disseminate or break down the type 1 versus type 2. There are a ton of agency reps, and I'm not going to pick on my Forest Service counterparts here, but I'm going to pick on my Forest Service counterparts. They will often come in with 5 or 6 agency reps, and the biggest challenge with that is who do we go to for IWI reporting? Who do we go to for questions that perhaps might involve resource advising? Who do we go to for modifying a delegation, whatever that might be? right? So the key for having a lead, just like anything else, is somebody to serve as that conduit and be the voice for the rest of the contingent of the reads and reeves. And so that lead read position is very key. Expectations are there involved. They're involved with the operation, and it's a symbiotic relationship, right? Operations needs to embrace the reads, but the reads also need to embrace the operation. And by meaning that is not dictate tactics. They're there as resource advisors, right? And so that's where I think a lot of times where some ops groups or some teams can get sideways with resource advisors is, sometimes there's that perception that they might become a little too tactical. So having a dedicated lead read, somebody to go to, is not only important for me as an incident commander, but for our ops chief, for our plans chief, to really have, again, it comes back to those relationships. And so that's how I would characterize that is having that lead read. And again, in doing so, what we do is we embed a read on our team. And that person, that individual serves as a read liaison / lead read. Understanding that you could have lead reads that have been assigned from the local unit, but that liaison officer is that conduit to connect with those individuals and serve as that focal point.
Oh, fantastic. Teresa, what are your expectations of a lead read?
Well, I think since Jeremy put the strike team of AAs out there that we've been seeing lately on Forest Service fires, I will share a little bit about, first of all, what that group is actually all about, because we've been meeting a lot with our local contingents of ICs here in Region 5, and that's been coming up a lot with the ICs about what's the deal with all these AA reps and folks on all these fires. And so I just want to touch on that really briefly, because I don't think that we have done a great job in the Forest Service of explaining who's who on these fires. And when you have fires like the Dixie, Scott mentioned he was out there for that. When you have a fire of that enormous size and complexity, then it ends up that you have quite a large group of AA reps that are needed. So on a fire, you're only going to have one agency administrator, and typically that's going to be the forest supervisor or the deputy forest supervisor. In some cases where a district ranger has the advanced qualifications, it might be a district ranger that takes that fire as well. So you're only going to have one agency administrator, and then sometimes you'll have a coach that comes in for that agency administrator. So if the forest supervisor is new and they haven't had a lot of fire experience, a coach will come in, and so then there you have another agency administrator, but they're a coach, and so they're not making the decisions, they're just helping that AA with their job. And so then what you have is a whole group of folks that are serving as agency administrator reps, AA reps. And those folks, what I've had on a lot of fires here on the Sequoia is up to 3, maybe 4, that I will actually carve out either different parts of the fire for them to focus on or different areas of need. And so one of the models that we used last year was I had at various times I had up to 4 different agency reps helping me, and they were all working for the Forest Service. And in some cases, I would actually make one of them the primary point of contact for the reads. So their job was just to focus on what the reads needed, be that #1 liaison for that lead read, and be there to support and help the reads with what they needed, because we had 20, 25 reads working at one time. So they needed that type of support from the agency administrator. So we did that in the form of an A rep. So that's what you could see. And then the other thing that occurs, and this is why sometimes there could be up to 8 or 9 people who were walking around serving in the role of A rep, you'll have shadow teams that come out of agency administrators from all over the country, and it could be 3 or 4 different folks that come with another agency administrator coach who are helping them get experience and learn about the job. And then they'll have task books with them for agency administrator where they're trying to get different items signed off on their task book. So an IC might meet 8 or 9 different people in one day on a large fire that have the title of agency administrator rep. So it can get really confusing. And one thing we've talked about doing better on as AAs is actually providing to the IC daily a who's list so that they know who is there, who's doing what their intent is, what their objective is. So that could probably help the reads as well. And we need to do a better job with that. Just with regards to what we expect from the lead read, the only other things that I'll share is that I've really been impressed with lead reads in the past is their ability to be organized around their job with essentially supervising all of the reads that come in. It can be really complicated, scheduling all of the jobs that are needed, whether it's in the field or in camp, the administrative piece of it. But just that organizational skill of being able to supervise and lead that group and having some type of plan where we could step into where the reads are working and actually see posted, whether it's on a whiteboard or a flip chart or whatever, what that daily plan is for that group has been really helpful. And then just having that strong leadership skill and being able to communicate both to your ICs and all this strike team of A reps that work on a fire, as well as your entire group of reads and the local unit. I mean, communication is just all over the place with regards to what a lead read has to do. It's huge. And so there's a lot of need for being able to be communicative in a verbal way as well as written. We ask a lot, I think, of the lead reads when they're on these complex fires. So I think those, I could go on about that, but I'll turn it over maybe to one of the others on the panel and they might have more to share.
Thank you, Teresa. Jeremy, do you have any thoughts on this? Expectations for a lead read?
No, nothing much else from what they've covered, except I think the big thing, just like in our day job, is keeping those lines of communication open because as we know, a lot of things get miscommunicated between the different agencies when we have these large fires that burn across multiple boundaries. So we've got to keep those lines of communication open and make sure our intent is clear on what we're trying to accomplish between the different agencies and make sure that we're meeting the needs of all the agencies we're working for, not just the lead agency. So making sure that those lines of communication are open with all the reads we're working for. So that's a big one. That's all I got. Thanks.
Okay, fantastic. I think that's Scott. Did you need to leave? Sorry, was there a
No,
message?
I'm still on, but I've got some bandwidth issues, so I just turned my camera off. Sorry about that. There was a lot of lag time here. Just to add on to what Teresa said, in terms of expectations on a lead read, my expectation is they'll work with a team and work things out at the lowest level possible. Because if they're not able to do that, then the agency administrator is basically serving as the lead read at that point. And so all the lead reads that I've met are really good at that in managing those kind of things. And sometimes there's a lot of challenges there, both from folks they're supervising while on the fire, as well as the teams in many cases. But that's my expectation of a lead read is they develop those relationships and those partnerships with the team, with the public, with interested parties, including tribes, that they've got that feel for how things are going. And if it's beyond their control, then they elevate it up to the agency administrator. And that's That's my expectation for lead reads, and it's a lot. It is. There's no doubt. We put a lot on them, and like Teresa said, it's really critical that they are well organized, because disorganization is really, really complicating when a lead read is not able to get their folks organized, scheduled out, and planning where the highest priority work is. That can be a real problem, not just for the agency administrator, but for the team as well, and could create some conflict there. So I think that is really an important piece there. One thing I encourage not just my lead reads, but resource advisors to do as well, is when they're in camp and they see folks that are on their section of line or ops people sitting down having dinner or breakfast, that they go over and sit down with them. Because what they're doing when they're sitting there eating and talking is they're building those relationships. And that seems to make things really work a lot better, because they're seeing each other as individuals at a time when maybe they're a little more relaxed than when they're on the line and things are getting kind of squirrely. And so I think that's a really key component here, that they are building those relationships and trying all they can to make sure that they're creating that good work environment.
Fantastic, thank you. So we have 2 questions left and about 17 minutes to go. So chain of command, reads serve as an important link between the home unit, AA, local resource specialist, and the IMT. I see ops plans more. What tips do you have for reads to be successful? You want to go ahead and start with Teresa?
Well, I think we've touched on some of that with what folks were just sharing. I think what Scott was sharing and whatnot. For me, really the thing that I find to be extremely helpful is the lead read, helping the whole team of folks that they have working there as reads and reefs, becoming the eyes and the ears for me out in the field when they're out and about, or even when they're in camp. The fact that they're learning and gaining all this information on the ground about the fire and everything that's going on related to fire suppression. I think just having that, and this is just something that just keeps coming up with this discussion, having that ability to communicate that back to make sure that I'm aware of the critical things that I need to know. And so really it's going to require you to filter a lot of information and figure out what it is that local agency administrator really needs to know to help everybody be successful, to help the team be successful, and to help us get the fire out. And so that's our ultimate goal. And really keeping those relationships intact that we already have, but also helping us with the relationships with our partners and with our communities. And I know we ask a lot. It seems like we ask more and more of the reads, and especially the lead reads these days, with how complex fires have been getting. And I see a question there in the chat about what is the typical span of control for a lead read. And it's just grown exponentially with the fact that these fires have gotten so large and complex, and sometimes there's 5 different agencies involved. I know with the last couple of large fires here on the Sequoia, there was every single federal agency was involved with the fires, as well as all of our local and county and state partners. So the complexity of it has just become really, I think, a lot more challenging the last few years. And like somebody noted there, Jason noted, it varies greatly. I would totally agree with that in terms of the reads job. It's really going to be based on that fire. And it's just so important to have some time when you first arrive with the agency administrator as the lead read. I would just suggest, if you have not heard from the agency administrator or gotten to talk to them personally, reach out to them and make yourself known. They're just super busy. It isn't that they're ignoring you or don't want to talk to you. They're just extremely busy. and they need to know who you are and how to get a hold of you. And it might be that it's 8 o'clock at night and you say, hey, I need to talk to you. I want to introduce myself. Let's carve out some time and kind of force the issue a little bit there to say, we really need to talk. Make a plan for how you're going to communicate. Are you going to text? Are you going to call once a day? Are you going to have a standing meeting? How are you going to keep that connection with your AA? So I'll turn it over to somebody else to add anything more.
Jason, do you have any thoughts to add? Tips for a successful week?
Yeah, we've danced around a lot of these concepts, previous conversation here, but I think 3 things. One, organization, right? That's for tips to be successful. You need to be very, very organized, technically astute, understand your job, understand the resource and the connection to it. Quick example, you're an archaeologist, right? Or is the other Lynn archaeologist? I know Gasaway is an archaeologist, but understanding the connection to some of the cultural and tribal values. I mean, it's really easy to observe a cut fence or to observe a dozer line going down a steep slope, but understanding, connecting with the local resource. I think that is so important, and it ties back into relationships, right? And then being accessible, like Teresa said, agency administrators, ICs, ops everybody's busy. It's not to single out 1 or 2 demographic, but everybody's busy, but being accessible. And if you're available for questions or to bounce ideas, insert yourself, be part of the team. And I think you'll be that'll serve you very well. So I'd say communication, organization, and accessibility, and I'd leave it at that.
I like that. That's very clear, all 3 steps. Jeremy, is there anything you'd like to add?
Sure. Just a couple other things on that. I'll say patience for breeds, because I know the last couple of years, I know last year we were on your forest, Teresa, working on that windy fire, and we had some Park Service reeds that were helping out with the Sequoia groves. And, they wanted us to get in there and put out some of the fires that were lingering on them, but didn't quite understand the risk of working underneath them with the fires in the crowns and the fires up top and stuff like that. So just explaining the risk involved working underneath those massive trees, and the long travel times of getting people out if they got injured and the risk involved there. So just trying to explain to those folks about that, getting those folks out with injuries and things like that. So just trying to bring people together with common language about the risk involved. And so just asking people to be patient while we work together to come up with the common workings of how we're going to achieve the goals of the fire, both suppression oriented and then the rehab oriented part of the fire. So I know a lot of folks don't always have the suppression background these days, but we're all working toward trying to teach everybody that we bring into the fire realm, what we're working with and how we can bring them along so that they understand both sides of fire, and we can get them what they need. So I would say patience, and then echo what Jason said as far as organization. And I guess I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeremy. Scott, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I do. And all those are great examples, I think, on what allow reads to be successful. I'll add 3 more. And one of them's a rinse and repeat here that's already been stated. Relationships is so important out there. Composure. There's a lot of stress in the system. And when folks get stressed, things tend to go sideways. So maintain your composure. Even if folks dig a line through TES habitat that you've clearly got marked, still maintain that composure, because if you lose your composure, that just makes things worse. And then third is adaptability. Reads have to be super adaptable, super flexible, really nimble, because what you're doing may change at the drop of a hat. You may switch completely from what you were doing. I remember one time I went from raking out owl trees to doing some bear education, and having to deal with some dumpsters that weren't being properly handled, to some stream work, almost within a few hours time. And so there's a lot of moving parts. You may be on line repair for days on end, and then you go through a period where you're not doing the same thing for more than an hour or two straight. So a lot of adaptability, flexibility, nimbleness is really important, and just be okay with that. Go with the flow.
Fantastic. Scott, while I have you on, we're on to the next question. Can you provide one real example, either good or bad, of an experience you have had as either an AA or an IC with reads, and what is the lessons learned?
Yeah, I have lots of examples. I'll try to pick one out here that I think is helpful. You know, occasionally, and folks that have been around for a while know that sometimes, even doing your best as a resource advisor, there are folks that are not happy you're out there with them. They're just not. And I will tell you, there was a time, and I won't say where, when, because I don't want to give up any names, but I was asked to go to a section of line where some reads were being asked to leave daily. There was a division supervisor there that just did not want the reads on the line, period. And so I was asked to go out there and do some work, and I went out and encountered this division supervisor, and had a conversation with them. And you could tell they were not happy I was there, and they were trying to encourage me to leave the line. And I asked them, they told me they had a lot of responsibility on their shoulders, and they were responsible for everyone out there. And I said, well, let me ask you a question. How many folks have you lost under your care, under your division in the past? And they stopped and looked at me, and they said, well, I haven't lost anybody. I said, well, you must be a pretty good division supervisor then. I said, keep up the good work. And I went back to my work, and what that did was that set the stage with that division suit, that I respected their position, their authority, and their responsibility. And after that, we had no more problems on that line. They worked with the read great that we had out there. I went to a different section of line. Nobody had any further issues out of that division suit. But I think sometimes just acknowledging folks have a lot on their plate is really helpful in building that relationship. So people know you're real, you're there to help them, you're not trying to get in their way. And again, it's back to building that connection with them on the ground. So that's one short story, and I've got lots more, but I'll stop there and let others share.
Thank you so much, Scott. Jeremy, do you have an example to share, good or bad?
Yeah, I'll just go back to the Wendy fire last year. You know, that fire with the damage it caused initially, and burning between the Thule Reservation and the Sequoia, and the groves it affected, and then the history the Sequoia had with the fires they had the year before. There was a lot of damage there, and I know initially we started out with the reeds. There was some discrepancies there, but we built some rapport with the reeds there, with that group, and met with them multiple times per day, and built a really good relationship with them throughout the fire, and also line officers, both BIA and the Forest Service, and had a really good, like I said, meeting every day, and a relationship with them. So it can be done. We have the reeds there and the ICP right next to ops, so they were meeting with them constantly, talking about tactics, talking about what was going on the ground. We had a division embedded with the suppression repair group, meeting with the reeds, so they were speaking a common language. They knew what was going on the ground. So yeah, it can be done. I would encourage it for anybody that's had a bad experience, like Scott just mentioned. I mean, we're all under a lot of pressure, right? Because of the last couple of years of COVID, everybody's got a lot of stress, but just because people have had a bad experience, don't cross people out. Give them another chance and see if you can change it for the better, because you know, there's a good experience just waiting around the corner. So I, you know, just looking back at that was a really positive experience last year, and that turned out really good. So that's my experience from last year. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeremy. Jason.
Yeah, I'll start. I've got a bad and a good, so I'll start with the bad because I want to end on a good. So a couple years ago, we had a couple of reads that just did not agree with the strategy, and a lot of the tactics that operations was implementing, and they just became quite contentious, and they were overly connected to specific resources, and we're trying to get a little too far into the weeds and dictate. And it became, you know, very, very challenging. And ironically, these individuals were embedded with our ops group. And we thought things were going well, but it went sideways on us in a hurry. And so, you know, coming back around full circle, what Jeremy had said earlier, you know, being adaptable or flexible, and just being patient. And, you know, that goes both ways, right? It's a symbiotic relationship again. Relationship keeps coming up, but it really was a pretty contentious situation where, you know, we just demobbed them, and it wasn't good. On the good side, so we had an opportunity at Crater Lake a couple years ago on two very, very large fires with limited resources to fire off a piece of line, and I used 3 reefs to do that. How cool was that? They go from being resource advisors to picking up a drip torch and putting fire in the landscape and burning out a couple miles of road. I hope that was a very rewarding experience for them. But again, you talk about adaptability. They adjusted on the fly, and they're reefs, right? They're firefighter qualified, arduous. They had the ability, they were arduous, all 3 of them were arduous. They had the ability to be out there and dragging fire, and it was a pretty cool success story. I wish we would have captured it. We did internally, but we didn't announce that too far and wide, but it was pretty cool. So yeah, it's again, there's all kinds of stories out there, but you know, there's some good and there's some bad, and I'll leave it with the good.
Thank you, Jason. And Teresa, taking us home here.
Well, I just think it's awesome that Jeremy shared the story about the sequoias, because, I mean, Jeremy, that actually means a lot to me that you felt like that ended up being a positive experience, because I will tell you that between the team that Jeremy was on and the group of reeds, especially the reefs and the lead reed, they literally saved giant sequoias from burning up. They've saved trees that are, you know, 2,000 plus years old. And we on the forest can actually point out the exact trees that, because of the passion and the skills that our reed team had, and that they were wanting to work so closely with the operations on what we could do to save the sequoias. We called them Sequoia first aid. They were literally going out and pulling material from around the giant sequoias so that they didn't burn. They literally saved these trees. And I just have to say, you know, the passion there, combined with how Jeremy described it, the tight coordination and great communication and working together as a team to try to do something that's going to be a positive effect on the resources, but keeping everybody safe. Because literally that was my big concern, was I didn't want to lose anybody or have anybody get hurt trying to save a giant sequoia. I couldn't have lived with that. So we ended up with a great success story. And Jeremy, while we're here, I don't know if you'd be willing, but I think it would be great if we could try to document that. I wanted to do that this winter, but it kind of got away from us. But if there's any way we could maybe join forces and make sure that we can document what was done there. And it's mostly, my motive is so that in the future, when we have sequoia trees that are threatened, that we could kind of pull from the the files there and show folks how it was done successfully. So I'd love to work with you on that. And the reads, you know, some of them, the really awesome botanical skills that we had, and we had giant sequoia folks from Yosemite National Park come and help. I mean, it was just an amazing effort that we couldn't have had happen if we hadn't had the reads there with that kind of leadership that they were displaying. So anyway, that I just wanted to reiterate a little bit more about what Jeremy had shared there, and hopefully, Jeremy, you'd be willing, if you don't mind, maybe we could work on trying to document that some ways so that we could share it with reads in the future, and ICs and AAs.
Okay, well, we are out of time. And I want to thank all the panelists and the Read cohort team. Thank you, Jason and Jeremy and Teresa, Scott. This is so critically vital, important. And I think one of the things about fire that I'm experiencing is how much passion and heart is involved in this. And so I couldn't thank you enough. We have one question in the chat box for those that can check. I'm going to be ending this presentation mindful of everybody's time, but we have a question. I will be moving to a new job in Southeast Washington State next month. Does anyone know of any interagency read groups in that area? So if anyone has any thoughts on that, please go ahead and make a comment in the chat box. But I just want to thank everybody. And we're excited to see you next month, Wednesday, July 20th. We're going to have a presentation on National Trails by Lindsay Steinwex. She's the Pacific Crest Trail National Scenic Trail Administrator. So thank you very much and have an amazing day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.